like those guys you mentioned, like Bijan, Saquon, Jameer, they've all been doing special things and showing that if you have a special X-factor player at the running back position, it can really enhance your offense.
That is Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty, who pointed out the value of the running back position is back up. It was down there for a few years, and he could be in play for the Bears at 10 after all these trades, and we'll see obviously what happens with free agency. Welcome back to the offseason. I'm Cassie Carlson, joined by the Tribune's Dan Wiederer. And Dan, can you frame up like what the Bears have in front of them with the draft capital available? Because it's either you can say 4 in the top 75, right, 3 in the top 50, and how they can really reshape this roster with young players in this first draft.
There's no question. You've got 7 picks left in your draft wallet for next month. And as you mentioned, 4 in the top 75. That's a premium spot in this draft, which is widely regarded as a draft that's pretty deep at some positions that the Bears might be interested in exploring. They've got an opportunity here to make significant additions in April that will really put this team in position to take a step up in the NFC North. We know they need to take several steps up in the NFC North, but they can add some immediate contributors pretty quickly.
You were at the Combine last week. If I were to have asked you this question last week, what was the most needy position that you might want to take in the draft, what would you have said a week ago?
There's no question that when this week started, offensive line was
yes,
number 1 on my position list. But now I think it drops down to 3, maybe 4. And now you're talking about tight end. Well, they addressed that again this week. You're talking about the defensive line, either at the edge or on the interior. And then I think running back's in that mix as well. And what a fun conversation this is. I've told everybody that will listen to me that I'm all in for the Ashton Jeanty conversation. I don't know what the decision
Not the pick, the conversation.
The conversation is great for the next 8 weeks.
Yes.
Let's have it, because I do think it's a worthy conversation to have. And similar to Bijan Robinson a few years ago, I think there are just players at that position that are special enough that you entertain it. You know, it's widely been thought of as a luxury pick at that position because you can find those guys in later rounds of the draft. You can plug holes with various stopgaps in free agency. But sometimes you just go out and you get yourself a special player that you know 5 or 6 years from now you're not going to look back on with any regret. Ashton Jeanty is going to be a big-time playmaker in the NFL. Whoever picks him is going to be really happy for a while. And so the Bears should have that conversation at Hallis Hall. They should talk about where their other needs are. And, hey, does this marquee playmaker fit in what Ben Johnson wants to do offensively? I think Ben would be pretty excited going through some of that tape.
So I used to ask this question to guests kind of tongue-in-cheek before the Combine and before all these trades were made, because given the history of what Ben Johnson had available to
right,
him in Detroit, because although he says that this offense will be structured around the strengths of it, you're a creature of your own habit. So what you had one of the best offensive lines in the league with
no doubt,
a ton of depth, and you had a running back duo that led that offense and opened up the rest of the game for Jared Goff. Now, he's already admitted that I think he's admitted it in other ways, that Caleb Williams is a way higher ceiling than Jared Goff, and you don't have to ask an expert, I don't think, to know that. So to have Caleb Williams as an asset and then to possibly have another duo, what he thinks about DeAndre Swift, I'm not totally sure.
Sure.
But I think he'd be totally game for adding another weapon in the backfield to open up his offense.
They loved what they did in Detroit with the 2 different styles of backs they had with Montgomery and Gibbs. You have, Sonic and Knuckles, and you know the different ways they could get the job done. I think Ben Johnson would love to add a thumper to his backfield, and Ashton Jeanty can be that type of runner for you, a tone setter, a guy that you can just stick the ball in his belly and know he's going to run hard. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all shapes up in the backfield, whether it's him or someone else. DeAndre Swift obviously had an okay season in year 1. The total yardage from scrimmage was there. The yards per carry was down. You'd like to see them get more out of him. But maybe part of that is just giving him another compliment and then finding situations that can play to his strengths. I do think it's really interesting. I know it's apples to oranges, college and the pros, but the Bears had only 3 rushes last year by backs of longer than 25 yards. Ashton Jeanty had 9 games last year in which he had a 50-yard run. So you want to talk about a guy who has that explosive playmaking ability. It's all there. And now the Bears have to have that conversation on where it slots on their draft board.
All right, he is on your top 5 list of prospects who you would take at number 10. Let's pull up that list. First, you have Mason Graham, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. I don't know. Do you think he's going to be available at 10? Does he fall because he weighed in like 24 pounds less?
This is the fascinating thing where a guy in the spring may take some dings that a team like the Bears should be celebrating. I said they should hope that his arms shrink a couple more inches before his pro day in Ann Arbor, because teams may shy away from the traits and not remember the tape and how good the tape is. If Mason Graham is there at 10, I don't think you hesitate at all to make him your pick. Just so good, so productive, so proven. I don't know if he'll get there to 10, but if he's there, you go ahead and pull the trigger.
I will point out that when he was talking at the Combine, I was shocked that he's not the biggest guy.
Sure.
When you look at him, just standing, I don't know that you would recognize that he would be a defensive tackle in the NFL just standing next to him. But, I mean, he's a game wrecker.
There's a lack of bulk. There's a lack of length. And I think Daniel Jeremiah said it best. He said this is a guy who is not necessarily made for the spring, but he's made for the fall. Well, those are the types of guys you try to win with, the guys who are good in the fall. The guys in the spring can be, a little bit of mirage at times. And so we'll see what happens with his draft stock over the next few weeks.
All right, your number 2 is Will Campbell. He's the tackle out of LSU. Whether or not he's a tackle in the NFL is the biggest question because he has short arms. They're like 3/8 of an inch too short for the 33-inch threshold. But this guy can play, and everyone says look at the bottom half.
This is where draft conversation always makes me laugh because I think that we get caught in the weeds sometimes and really get tied up in things about arm length. Well, nobody is going to shy away from taking Will Campbell if he's available at number 20. Because his arms are too short. And so why would they pick him at 20? Because they believe he can be a really good NFL player. Well, if he's good enough to be a really good NFL player at 20, he's good enough to be a really good NFL player at 10. So I think sometimes there's this paralyzation of thought in trying to find things that look exactly right. I don't know if he'll play tackle or guard in the NFL, but he's certainly worth considering. And I would give him a shot at tackle until you see that he can't make it out there. I think his acumen for the game, his tape in the SEC has shown he can do it at a high level against some pretty, prominent pass rushers. And so, that's definitely a guy they should be looking at, especially if he falls.
I keep bringing this up because I talked to some people at the Combine who mentioned he can also play center. So if that's where the Bears see he has position flexibility across the entire offensive line and he's available, again, given the history of Ben Johnson having one of the best offensive lines and them needing depth because history has shown them that they need it, that to me would be a smart pick.
Like, you always want to hit the home run if you're picking in the top 10, but you also want to have the sure things as well. And so these first 2 guys on the list, Mason Graham and Will Campbell, I think they're sure thing guys. Like, you're not going to look back in 5 years and go, man, we really blew that evaluation. He may not become an 8-time All-Pro, but he's going to be a reliable starter in the league for a long time. And you need help on the offensive line, so give it some consideration.
Your number 3 was Ashton Jeanty. We had already talked about him. Your number 4 is Michael Williams. This guy described as a freak athlete. And I think anytime you see a defensive lineman coming out of Georgia, that's got to pique your interest because we've seen the Bears pass on someone like Jalen Carter. You can argue if the timing of that was right for them or not. He emerges within years as one of the best defensive players in the league. So that's why I think Michael Williams is very intriguing as a prospect. Still young, too.
Right, young. He wasn't healthy all of last year, and so the tape doesn't look as good as you want it to, but he is a player that has a ton of juice. He plays with passion. He's a good run defender. He can do things, as we talked about earlier, to add teeth to your pass rush. There's major upside here, and if you get an athlete and you pair him with Dennis Allen and you put him opposite Montez Sweat, you can let your imagination run wild a little bit.
All right, you have 2 guys that you can't choose between at 5, so I'll let you explain why. James Pierce, he's the edge rusher out of Tennessee, and then Gray Zabel, an offensive lineman. Again, position flexibility, has played every single position on the O-line out of North Dakota State. What I like about him is that he has made the most out of every single opportunity he's been at. Senior Bowl, he really makes a name for himself, and then again, going to the Combine, and just his stock keeps rising.
Classic Wiederer move here. You ask me for top 5, I give you 6, right? Well, like just to really make it difficult. But no, you're right about Gray Zabel. This is a guy, again, position versatility is a big deal. He may be not as needed because you went out and got 2 guards, but he can also play the center position for you. And if you feel like he's got that upside to play inside, the same thing that we talked about with Campbell, if you think he can be your center and you think that surrounding him with 2 proven veteran guards can help him get off on the right foot, then give it some consideration. You did mention his performance in mobile, turned some heads, and there's genuine buzz about him as the draft nears. And then James Pierce is a little bit of my sleeper because he's a little thin. He's really long. He's going to be on the slender side, but there is some athleticism in there that says, like, there's a block of clay here that you might want to mold a little bit, and I think that he's going to be all over the board for teams this spring, but he is a guy that if you're into the athletic traits, there's going to be some things that you see that you really like.
So you said at 1 that you wanted to maybe take the sure thing in Mason Graham, and then you say with James Pierce, you might want to take a risk.
That's what I tell you. I'm going to bounce all over the board for you. It's one of those upside guys that you just want to take a longer look at to figure out if you can get the most out of him because there's things there. And he, maybe a little bit of a flashback to Leonard Floyd, which Leonard didn't have the greatest career in Chicago, but he's made himself a lot of money and stuck around the league for a long time. But there is some of that similar build there that gives you some ideas of some things you could do on the edge.
I'm going to have to ask you for your top 6 list next week
I'll
after
give
free
you 8.
agency. Yeah, after free agency. Dan, I appreciate you stopping by. You can follow him on X at Dan Wiederer, read him at the Tribune, or listen to his podcast, Take the North. When we come back, Tom Thayer predicts the Bears' starting offensive line next season and has a hot take on arm length. Stay with us.